Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and on today's episode of Wizard of Metal, we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. First things first, I want to apologize for not having put out anything on the Wednesday preceding this. It was an odd day, to say the least, and not a lot of things went as planned. It wasn't necessarily a bad day, it was just a much longer and less structured day than normal. But all that aside, let's real quick roll that D20 for the soundtrack choice, and then we'll get right to this. Well, in complete reversal of what we're going to be talking about, I guess we're doing smooth jazz. Because let's face it, today's subject matter is anything but smooth. So instead of analyzing a song and doing a build based around that, I decided this time around I would have a look at an entire album. I'm not going to go over all the lyrics of all the songs, don't worry. That would take too long, frankly. No, we're just going to be looking at the album as it impacted both myself and others as what it was. And granted, it's not exactly what one would call a stellar release, but it was the release that needed to happen. And we are, of course, talking about Metallica's legendarily infamous St.Anger. It is an album that for a long time I would often refer to as it which should not be named. And is St.Anger as evil as Voldemort? Not even close to it, but is it a bad album? Oh yeah, and there's reasoning behind that. So just real quick, I thought I would go for a build that emphasized, I guess, the idea of this idea of kind of like releasing rage, so to speak, because that seemed like what St.Anger was. So we've got Bolt Rail for that short, sustained burst of anger. We've got Searing Rush as kind of like toxic flame. We've got Bouncing Surge as a sort of like widespread hate blast, so to speak. And lastly, we've got Blazing Lariat, which is just when it's time to lash out. And then I'm taking Amulet of Sundering, not because it's a great relic, because there are better damage relics out there, but as this sort of idea of, and again, kind of being informed by lyrics, the idea of this Saint Anger around my neck. So I figured, heavy amulet, what the hell, that's as good of a metaphor as any. Now, let's see if there's anything up here that's catching my fancy. You know what? I think I am going to go until I get the retro floor plan, because in kind of a cheeky way, that's kind of taking the retro floor plan would kind of make it feel like, you know, all of the fans and the critics coming after me and me lashing out at them going, no, back away. I don't know. It's, like I said, it's a little cheeky. It's probably not entirely accurate to what's being talked about. Because even though the album, let's be fair, it's not good. There's a reason why I equated it with Voldemort. I don't think it necessarily deserves to be like the most hated thing in the world. Don't get me wrong, it's awful. But there's a part of me that's now looking at it with fresh eyes and... Okay, it's taking a while to get to this, but after looking at it with fresh eyes and thinking about it a little bit more clearly, and I'm going to get into this throughout the video, don't worry. As soon as, you know, the retro floor plan decides to show up and stop wasting my time. Come on. I dedicated myself to this idea, so I'm just rolling with it, but yeah, you're starting to bother me now, Nox. What are you doing to me? There's only so many times I can hear this song restart before I go and lose my friggin' mind. Oh, come on, this can't be that hard. Starting to get bothered, y'all. Like, is it possible that it's just not going to show up? There it is. Alright, now we can get on with the show. We are going to try to start... Yeah, right there. We've got a very fire-based run, and I think it's good to just take that and roll with it. So we're going to start here, and maybe by the time we get to Atlas, we'll have some stronger... What an embarrassing way to start a run. Just immediately get told, no, get back in the goddamn lava. Who do you think you are? Idiot, get back in the lava. So I suppose let's... Hold on. Wasn't quite expecting this room to show up. Not that I know what I was expecting. Ooh! Okay, that's a nice get. Really early on, too. Okay, so we're gonna take this, we're gonna take this. So, St.Anger, I remember when that album was announced, I was super excited for it, and obviously in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have been. I think I'm gonna grab the clover. It seems like the right idea. But especially after the somewhat disappointing load and reload. Like, and that's just what I was thinking is, oh boy, new Metallica, and it's gonna be better than this? Now, obviously, years later, we know that wasn't necessarily the case. So, just to drop some quick facts, the album St.Anger was released on June 5th, 2003. Now, fortunately, this was documented for the 2004 like documentary, Some Kind of Monster, which went over a lot of what was going on with Metallica at the time. Like, there was a lot to unpack with that one. Oh boy, they're even giving me the Journal of Midas. I'll be able to afford everything. Now I'm hoping that other gold-related relics show up. You know, like the Helm of Midas, or the Dagger of Midas, or the other things of Midas. we go. Now let's go back and fill in the map for the cartographer's quill. But a lot of what happened for St.Anger, what happened during the making of St.Anger was, was not just, the recording of the album, but there was a lot of turmoil going on in and amongst the band members. I mean, famously, the recording of St.Anger is what caused Jason Newsted to basically just say fuck it and bail. And this was also during the time before Robert Trujillo became the band's full-time bassist, so their producer, Bob Rock, actually stepped in as the bassist for the album, and oh boy, did that have mixed results. And there were already plenty of things that had some pretty mixed results, such as the awful miking of the drums, making everything sound really tinny and unrefined. Now, granted, the unrefined approach to the album is what they were going for, and in that one respect, I'd say, good job, guys. You set about a plan and you went for it. I wouldn't say it's the most well-advised plan you've ever executed, but hey. And that was something that Bob Rock said about the production, is that it was less about the refinement, it was less about creating something that was, mainstream and what have you. They were going for something more raw. Like he actually said, the album sounded less like a fully produced album, more like just four guys just jamming in the garage, which that's fine when you're four guys jamming out in your garage. But after you've made things like Master of Puppets, the Black Album, all these things that we've come to know and expect from Metallica, it just came off as really weird, to say the least. I know Atlas is a part of what's coming up. We'll take Breaking Twister. Plus, Breaking Twister is more control, and I'm all about that. And during the interview about St.Anger, Bob Rock flat out said things like, and let me look this up to make sure I've got the reading right. Now so I just found the part where he said, okay, so this is coming from Bob Rock. I wanted to do something to shake up radio and the way everything else sounds. To me, the album sounds like four guys in a garage getting together and writing rock songs. Okay, yeah, great, awesome. Here's the other part I was thinking of. They liked the raw performances. Now, Bob Rock actually is quoted saying, "There was really no time to get amazing performances out of James. We liked the raw performances and we didn't do what everyone else does. And what I've been guilty of for a long time, which is tuning vocals. We just did it, boom, and that was it." And again, from an artistic standpoint, yeah, I can definitely applaud them for just going for what they wanted, both Bob Rock and Metallica themselves. But I think it's the execution that we all look at and go, yeah, guys, that was pretty awesome. And then throughout the mixing and recording of the album, there were times during their other albums where they would spend hours just fine-tuning mixing and and making sure everything was just right, and those are things that they clearly did not do on St.Anger. It's not just apparent, they actually flat out said they didn't do that. Instead of taking hours, they just kind of spent 5 minutes setting things up and said, okay, go! Oh, we've got our critical hits going nuts. Don't want Sparrow Windstone, actually. Also, if you can't tell, the birds are pretty excitable today. Now, there may be some of you who are looking into it going, okay, but the idea was to shake up the way things sound. Why was it so poorly received? I mean, to be fair, the idea that it was so abnormally structured might have been part of it, but I don't think that was the whole story, because, I mean, we've seen for a long time now that these guys are genuinely artists, and they can put out some good stuff. Alright, I think I'm going to not take anything from here, because I know it's tempting to take Glass Cannon, but that also makes me more vulnerable. Everything else has its problems that I don't want to deal with, so yeah, we're just gonna go. I'm gonna grab this just in case I can give it away to something. It's kind of the same reason why I took Yuffie's shawl. Hello, Zeal. So where do you stand on St.Anger? Do you like it, do you hate it, or are you somewhere in the middle on it? Owie! Ball Lightning. I'll take it just because it's another option to use, but of the charge attacks, this one is kind of one of the least useful. Unlike the others, this one will never hit more than one target. And this seems like the perfect time to see that. So, okay for bosses, maybe alright for PvP because of how fast the projectile itself moves, but ultimately, I'd say there are better options than Ball Lightning. Thank you for landing on my twisting. What is the name of this spell again? Breaking Twister. That's it. Do we have anything extraordinarily useful here? We got that. Oh, I can upgrade you. Yeah, that's worth it. And I think I'll definitely go over there and buy the token of health. And I'll buy that too. And I'll buy that too. See, this is what happens when you give someone too much money. They just go, "Hey, I want it all!" So, getting back on the topic of St.Anger now, what ended up releasing was an odd, confusing mess. Like things sounding, like the lyrics sounding very sophomoric and very unrefined in comparison to their past efforts. You had, I think once again, I don't really want anything. You had, as I brought up, the very tinny sounding kind of sound from large drums, which can be very nicely replicated by essentially grabbing a few pots and pans and a couple of wooden spoons and just going to town. You've got Hetfield with his interesting vocal range, which, for those of you that don't know, a lot of his singing style was inspired by country artists of all things. And you can hear it when you listen to things like Turn the Page, but sometimes it's hard to tell, especially when you're listening to something as raw as Master of Puppets. It can be really difficult to tell. Because of the feather, or the cartographer's quill, I want to fill in that spot on the map, and then we will go to the boss room. And the riffs were kind of all over the place. Let's be fair, some of them were good, but there is a lot about that album that really rubbed people the wrong way. It was easy to tell that these were not the droids that they were looking for. And I can tell you my personal perspective on the album when it dropped. I was, a much younger me, and at the time, I knew that there was something off about the album, and the first listen to it, I didn't care. I was just going, "Yeah, more Metallica!" Which, let's be fair, I really loved Metallica at the time. Still do. This isn't like the story of how I stopped loving Metallica. Far from it. No, I just listened so my first listen to it, I was excited because, hey, new Metallica. And it was each subsequent listen after that, I started to pick apart things like, why does this sound like this? What are these lyrics? I don't understand. Is this the sound you guys are going for? Here's the token of health. Oh, baby. Oh, it feels so good. But again, I remind you that this was coming off of Reload, which, yeah, if it was possible for an album to sound more mainstream homogenized, it's very possible. By the way, there are bands out there whose entire repertoire and existence is based upon that idea of structure on the mainstream. You don't believe me? Then go look up Nickelback and look up Chad Kroger's songwriting style. But be forewarned, that sort of thing stays in your internet search history, so you might not want to do that. All I'm saying is, for as annoyed as a lot of Metallica fans were from them kind of not dumbing down, but them kind of stepping away from their thrash metal roots into something a little bit more... I mean, I think homogenized is the wrong word, but I also think it's the proper description. So from them to go from Master of Puppets and Justice for All to something as mainstream sounding as Load and Reload, and yes, the Black Album. I may love that album, but I am well aware of the idea that it definitely strays away from their thrash roots. Grab that, but there's nothing else really here. Like, this run doesn't really involve me getting that close, so the Cobalt Firestone is, yeah, iffy. I mean, I could grab it. Yeah, what the hell. Alright, we're on this way. So by those standards, because what we had just gotten was Load and Reload, and it sounded so not metal. And don't get me, there were good songs, but here's the thing, for me, Reload is personally one of my least favorite Metallica albums. But mostly even the songs on there that people do point to and say are really good, like Fuel and The Memory Remains, I personally don't like them that much. And I don't know, maybe the problem is on me in some way, I'm not 100%. Or maybe there is no problem and I just have preferences. You ever think about that, brain? Now, I know mainstream music would prefer that none of us had preferences, we just all listen to the same homogenized garbage. But I'm not that person. Hold on to it for now, but there's a good chance I'm not going to keep it. So, anyway, that's enough ranting about that. So coming off of the back of something like that, it just hearing more Metallica that was more raw and held that kind of aggression that I really liked from Master of Puppets. Like, that may have clouded my initial judgment on the album. Because it was seriously a lot of me going, oh my god, this kicks so much ass! But eventually the scales fell, and as I listened to the album more and more, I started to become a little bit more disillusioned with what I was listening to the point where I eventually said, man, this album sucks. So that was me essentially being a little disillusioned and, you know, telling myself, no, it's good, I swear. But I think that was a combination of of not thinking clearly and just having come off of a very decidedly not very thrash metal-y album. So it was almost like being hypnotized in a way. Nowadays, my view on St.Anger is that it was an interesting art experiment, but nothing that I'm like going to revisit anytime soon. Okay, you are a super douche. You know that? Okay, I am getting my ass kicked here. Hello, Shearing Chain. It's good to see you. Okay, now I'll grab something. Lovely. Alright, finish clearing out the map to get that cartographer's quill nice and meaty. Nice. Do you have anything I want? Another token of health? Like, really? A second one? Well, you know, tell you what, I kind of feel like gambling. And actually, I think I think the ironclad card holder is actually, or nowadays we call it the Ridge Wallet. But yeah, I think my Ridge Wallet is a little bit more useful than Yuffie's shawl. Oh, there's a lot more to do. Hold on, we gotta finish exploring the floor. Well, that was awful. Wow, I'm getting destroyed. Okay, no more getting destroyed. That's not how we win runs. Though granted, this is a St.Anger themed run, and let's be fair, that album got destroyed. Oh, actually it didn't. The album went double platinum. So I can make fun of it all I want, but, you know, it sold. It sold hard. It wasn't worth it. I'm gonna hit you with a curveball. Yes. Yes, it was. The album is no good, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that album deserves anything more than derision. But it is something that I think absolutely needed to happen, because another thing that Bob Rock says in that interview, and well, not even Bob Rock, but something that's easy to infer from the album itself is that this wasn't necessarily an album for the fans. This was an album for Metallica themselves. This was an album that needed to be made for them. So, you know, for their posterity. Because it was an album that was being made at a super tumultuous time during the band's history. And you can tell just by listening to the lyrics that a lot of it was just getting aggression out and letting it all out there, putting their feelings to the record, so to speak. And it's not to say that never happened on any other record, but what it was on St.Anger was it was more personal than anything else. Because a lot of it was, you know, talking about control issues, talking about anger, talking about self-respect or the lack thereof. And like I said, it was also the album that famously caused Jason Newsted to leave the group. But it also led to them getting Robert Trujillo, who is now the band's longest-running bass player. Like, St.Anger might have been a trash fire in and of itself, but it did lead to some real positive things. Alright, well, Catalytic Tonic is no good, but the heal was nice. And I'll buy this too. So, to use a famous line, it might not have been the album that we wanted, but it was the album that we deserved. Or rather, it's the album that Metallica deserved. It was an album that they needed to make for themselves so that they could set themselves on the right path. And I'll just straight up say it, the album was made for them. It was essentially therapy. And I think, considering the sort of things that we saw in the documentary Some Kind of Monster, and even from the band's own words as well as their producers, it was very obvious that they were trying to not only just get back to something a bit more raw feeling, but they were also trying to get themselves into a better state. You know. However you want to take it, mentally, emotionally, like keep in mind that this is a James Hetfield who was just coming out of a long stint in rehab. He was definitely working through some issues, and to say that he didn't need a little bit of extra time to put things together, I think would be saying things completely wrong about the scenario. Plus 24, loving it. There we go. That was a nice beatdown. Ooh, Hammer of Atlas. I like it, but I'm not going to hold on to it. And I think we're going to do that. So, again, do I think it's a good album? Not even a long shot. But I think it's an album that needed to happen because after they got their shit together and they were no longer working with their unresolved issues, that's when we got things like Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct and that giant tribute box to the Black Album. And say what you want about the Black Album, but that was where most of us started listening to Metallica, and like I said, I don't care. I like it. You can say whatever you want about that album, but it did a lot of good, both for metal as a genre, despite how mainstream it is, and for Metallica themselves. As far as their newer work, I would say you'd be hard pressed to find someone who loves Hardwired to Self-Destruct more than I do. I know that's inviting challengers to that. No, I'm the ultimate fan throne, but that's not even necessarily what I'm going for. I'm not trying to prove that I'm the ultimate fan of anything. I'm bringing it up because yeah, they really pulled together and started making some incredible art. And would we have gotten that had it not been for the absolute fail fest that was St.Anger? Probably not. There were a number of things that had to go wrong for St.Anger to fail on the level that it did. And even, again, that's not even necessarily an appropriate statement because it went double platinum. But for all of its flaws, I think it's one of those things where you look at the bad and go, okay, yeah, that really sucked, but what came out the other side of that tunnel was amazing, and I think we can all appreciate the heaviness, the aggression, the pure thrashy goodness of Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And we wouldn't have gotten there had it not been for St.Anger, so that's my 2 cents, as well as my retrospective on one of the most infamous metal albums ever released. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let me know what you think about this type of episode for Wizard of Metal. I've done a good few episodes of this now, and all of them so far have been focused on songs specifically, where I talk about the song, the lyrics, the meaning. This is my first time doing an actual, like, album review slash retrospective. And again, it's mostly just from my own personal perspective with some data to back up what I'm saying. So let me know what you guys think about this format and if you want to see me do it again. I thank you for coming and spending some of your free time with me as per usual, and I will see you guys in the next one. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and I will be seeing you.